Welcome to episode 1143 of The Sleeper and the Bust. I'm Justin Mason, joined as always on Sundays by Jason Collette. How you doing, my friend?
Hey, good morning, man. How you doing today?
I'm doing well. We are entering like prime time drafting time, right?
Yes.
It is drafting season. I've got my first kind of live draft, or non-slow draft of the season tomorrow. Might beat Justin Mason OC. So I'm excited for that. I'll be live streaming it for those who are interested. You can catch it on my YouTube and my Twitch and my Twitter, which are all Justin Mason FWFB. And I think I might even put it up on the Fangraphs site. I got to figure out if I'm allowed to do that. So, yeah, it's prime time drafting season. Podpalooza's next weekend. So Get ready for that. It'll be 2-day live stream event. Yeah, just a lot of awesome things going on right now. How you doing?
Pretty good, man. I got my RotoWire OC a week after yours. So mine is Monday, February 27th, I think at 8:00 p.m. Eastern. And then like Jeff Erickson's is at 11 o'clock for West Coasters. I haven't looked to see if mine's filled up yet. But if you're interested, go find it and come on in. But yeah, I think this weekend is my last draft-free weekend. Between next week with that and the following week is AL Labor, and then the following week is a new 15-team mixed league draft that we have, like snake draft format that we're starting up in the Carolinas. With a couple of listeners are actually in the league that I know of. Then it's tout, so I'll see you there. And then I have a break. I think I have a break the weekend in between that, like weekend of March 24th. I think that's the only weekend right now I don't have any drafts, but I have to be home for. There's something on my calendar. It's like I had to keep that one blocked out. And then I'm in New York to work with the Moneyball League. And I know a couple of those guys listen in, so looking forward to seeing you guys. And then I've got to fly home immediately from that and get into my home AL auction, and then I'll be done.
Yeah, I've got my Beat Justin Mason League, which, like I said, it's the RotoWire OC that's drafting tomorrow. I think 3 p.m. Eastern is when that is. So if you're off and want to watch that, you can. And then I've got Barf coming up, Tout coming up. I'll be going to Vegas. It seems that I'm almost officially finalizing all of that for the NFBC drafts at the end of end of March.
It's that one weekend that I'm not doing anything. Is when you guys are all in Vegas. I heard you and Paul talking about that in the last episode about cold in the desert, and cold's relative when you're talking to Paul, because anything below 75 is cold.
We also have listener leagues through the Patreon being set up. So we've almost got a full Dynasty League, 12-team Dynasty League. So if you want to be a part of those listener leagues, you got to subscribe to the Patreon at the $4.20 tier. Get into the Discord, because I'm setting them all up through that Discord app and channel. So I've almost got that one filled up.
Which formats are we doing there? Because I would like to get in one, play with the listeners. I do not want to do a Dynasty League though.
If you look in the Discord under the listener leagues channel, I have posted a Google Doc, and I pretty much set up like every single potential format. So there's 10, 12, and 15 team leagues for Roto, for points on ESPN, on Yahoo. It looks like the Dynasty ones, which are going to be on Fantrax, and the head-to-head categories are the two on Yahoo are the two closest to being filled up. So, I'll join as many as people want to join. Jason said he'll join a league or two. I know Paul's going to join a league or two. So, definitely jump in there and be a part of that. It's going to be a lot of fun trying to beat me, which should be pretty easy considering my year last year. So today we are discussing kind of targeting players with talent on bad teams. So I'll let you kind of talk about this topic a little bit as your kind of brainchild, because you were looking at the A's, I think it was.
Yeah. I was looking at ADP of the A's, and I tweeted something out Saturday, and I was like, woof, it's like where everybody is. And then even this morning looking at it, you can get 180 picks into a draft and a single Nationals player is not off the board. That's it. And the first one off the board by ADP is Kyber Ruiz. That's kind of crazy. Like, oh yeah, JT Real Muto is not even the first. He's not even the first player off the board by ADP on his team. And yet here's a second-year catcher is the first player off the team for the Nationals. So it's like this podcast episode has a little bit for everybody. So if you're in even a shallow league, some of the guys we're going to talk about are very applicable to you. But this is also one for you deep leaguers, you AL or NL only folks. It's like you got to start it. I know you're probably already thinking about this, but you have to start thinking about this because when you look at your player pool, it's like, okay, yeah, there's all these guys, but some of these guys are just simply undraftable. Conversely, there's also opportunity where there's all this confusion about who's going to play and who's not. There's opportunity here. And so I love to look at these types of guys and really like a transition to our first news story. Back in 2021, when Robbie Grossman landed with Detroit, I was all over Robbie Grossman because at the time, good player, bad team, he can get the volume and do something. He ended up having a 2020 season. And I remember taking Robbie Grossman in the reserve rounds of things. And so that offers a nice transition on our news of the day as we head into the topic of this particular podcast, because there's opportunity here where there's a lot of bad baseball. But at the same time, there's also potholes and landmines that you want to avoid on some of these rosters as well.
Yeah, let's talk about that news piece. It's Robbie Grossman signing a deal to be what looks like the everyday left fielder in Texas for the Texas Rangers. Are you targeting Robbie Grossman? The Rangers have been a team that has liked to run over the last few years. Now you've got larger bases and the new pickoff rules and things like that. Could have some sneaky value.
You also have a new manager in play there too. So you have to see how old school Bob Brenly, right? Is that who's there? Is Bob Brenly?
I can't even.
It's one of the old NL West managers. I feel like an idiot. All of a sudden, I'm like, I want to say it's Bob Brenly, but it doesn't feel right. Bob Melvin is probably the right answer. As those you guys are yelling at your favorite podcast device, going, Jason, Jesus. So new manager in play also because
Bruce Bochy. Why didn't I get?
I knew it was one of those old catchers.
No.
One of them.
I should have remembered that. Yeah,
one of those old catchers. So Chris Woodward did like to run. We don't know. I guess we'd have to go back and look to see how Bruce Bochy, what his managerial tendencies were. One of the things that I mentioned earlier, when Robbie Grossman at the time, decent player, bad team, was going to get the volume, I liked him because he was very underrepresented by ADP at the point. This one, as I try to understand this particular move and the trickle-down effect, one thing for me with Robbie Grossman, if you have been targeting like Bubba Thompson as a late-round speed dart, that dart just got a lot less sharp because he is now firmly going to be going down in the minor leagues. And Leody Taveras was already out of options anyhow, but I think it further cements his spot on the roster. And then you look at what this could buy them. They've been working on Ezekiel Duran as an infield outfield type, Josh Smith infield outfield type. So it buys them some time there. I think the bigger factor here is you look at the projected OBPs of the back half of that lineup, and all of them are sub 300 guys, except for now Robbie Grossman. So the bottom of that lineup was really projected to be have some trouble getting on base. And Grossman, that's one of his skills. It's one of the things he does well is he's able to get on base. So it gives him a little more depth in the bottom of the lineup. So the top of the lineup, which is where their beef is, isn't always coming up with nobody on base type of factor. With Grossman, though, he certainly does have his flaws. Even with the 2020 season he's had, I was looking at some of his numbers this morning. You realize he only once he's had a barrel rate he's never had a barrel percentage above 50%. Not even in the 23 homer, 20 steal base did he do that. And that was all volume. He's never had a hard hit rate above that. And so there's a lot of blue all over his StatCast profile over the years. The one thing he's done really well is draw those walks. They are red every single year. The lowest percentage he's ever had is 72%. But he's a very disciplined hitter. He's one of the toughest guys in the league to get to expand his strike zone. And so ultimately, that's where I think the value is here. And I believe he's going to provide some ancillary value to the top of that lineup because, again, it's going to at least give them a better chance of having guys on base to drive in. So if you're going to have Semien leading off and you're going to have Seager hitting second as they're currently projected to do, then that gives them something. Conversely, if Robbie Grossman does rediscover some of his 2021 magic, perhaps he hits leadoff. And he hits leadoff against certain batting type, and that pushes everybody else down a little bit and puts them in a better position. So I'm more interested in the macro level impact than I am Robbie Grossman himself here. But there's an opportunity here for him to do something. I just don't see him jumping into that role like he had in Detroit, where he's out there every single day just volumizing.
Yeah, I think he is an interesting guy for kind of deeper formats because I do think he's going to play a fair amount. The question is, Texas is not a great place to hit for power necessarily anymore now that they're in the new park. And we don't know, are they going to be as aggressive on the base paths as they have been the best? I mean, my recollection of having Bruce Bochy as a manager in San Francisco was they didn't run a ton. Now, they also didn't have a team that could run a ton. So it may have just been more of a matter of this was, it was a team built for a little just more, kind of dink and dunk hits and hitting a little bit for power. So it'll be interesting to see kind of what they do in spring training. Maybe that's a team to more closely watch in terms of their stolen base attempts and how many how often they're taken off. But if they are running like they have in the past, like Robbie Grossman could be a really nice source of cheap speed kind of later in a draft, a guy who might be able to take advantage of those new base, running rules and things like that than other guys.
So I will say a couple things. One, before we got on air, you and I were talking about like article ideas, and you just kind of hit on one that I had put down on my notepad, listening to the latest podcast, the Rates and Barrels with Al Melchior and Saris, while DVR is still on baby watch. Best wishes to him and the missus on that. So, but they mentioned that stolen base rates in the spring tend to be higher than the regular season. Like, I wanted to go back, and they didn't mention any data, but I want to go back and try to find the data on that and see where that is. So we can say like, hey, over the last X amount of springs, this is what the stolen base rate has been. So if we see, let's pull a random number, let's say 1.5 attempts per game. And this spring, if we see like 2.2, then that's like hey, something's, they're at least trying something, because we know they're going to use the spring as a laboratory anyhow. But you guys know from previous years, I've talked about one of the things I always watch the first 2 weeks of the season is where the ball is going, how the home run rates and all that, because it's always been a strong predictor of what's going to happen the rest of the season. We could see 2018, 2019, we could see the last few years, we could see what was going to happen. What happened in those first 10 to 14 days pretty much held up. It was a strong indicator of what happened the rest of the season. Then the other thing is, while you were talking, I went in and looked at the managerial tendencies page on Baseball Reference for Bruce Bochy. Early on in his career, and this was probably driven by the talent on the roster, but in his Padres days, they ran a lot. But in his Giants days, they not once were they a league average running team. And perhaps some of that early, he had Barry Bonds the 2007 year, but they did not run much at all in his Giants. I'm looking at rate. I apologize. I was looking at rate plus for third base, but stealing second base about every other year type of thing. As on the whole, in his 13 years in San Francisco, they were 98 on rate plus. So 100 being league average. And with the Padres, they were 101. So I would say on the whole, he's very average, but there were some seasons like in 2008 with the Giants, they were 135 stealing second. So at one point they like to run. You go back and look at that 2018 and see who was stealing the bases. Randy Wynn and Fred Lewis, Eugenio Velez, and Emmanuel Burris. Those were your burners of the 2008 Giants.
Yeah, that was a fun team. Because I do wonder if it was more a matter of the construction of the team and also maybe the front office. I know Bochy took a lot of his cues from the front office in terms of strategy. So we'll just kind of wait and see. Let's move on to the next news item and the last news item for the day. That's Edwin Ríos signing a deal to play for the Chicago Cubs. Jason, why do they hate Matt Mervis?
Why do they have this? They have a type. They certainly do have a type. They do hate Matt Mervis, but they have a type. Like when I look at this profile, the age, the minor league numbers, the strikeout, it's like this screams like, can we hit another Patrick Wisdom, Frank Schwindel, lightning in a bottle moment? Because this is similar profile, big numbers, in the minors, lots of strikeouts, older player. Let's give him a chance. I don't, a couple of years ago when they grabbed Schwindel and they grabbed Wisdom and see it worked for a bit, but it wasn't sustainable. We all saw that coming. So it's like they're doing it again. And perhaps this is because he can play both sides of the diamond type of situation, but they certainly have a type. That type apparently is not a 23-year-old with a lot of upside. It is a near 30-year-old, in this case, almost 29-year-old player, because he turns 29 about 2 weeks into the season. So it's a late 20s guy who probably doesn't have any upside, and they're just hoping to catch lightning in a bottle. I frankly don't get this one, but Iowa fans, Matt Mervis should be there for a bit.
Yeah, I don't really get this one either, unless there's a move coming that I'm not seeing. Because I don't understand when you've got Patrick Wisdom already on the roster, you've loaded up with Mancini and Eric Hosmer to kind of play first in DH, and you have Matt Mervis waiting in the wings. Like, where Edwin Ríos really fits in on this team, less Christopher Morel is in some real trouble in terms of making the opening day roster. And I don't understand why they wouldn't at least get. I don't like Morel. I don't think, I don't like his swing and miss. I don't like his inability to make contact. But he's also a super young player that has power and speed, and has shown flashes of potentially being a really, really good player. I don't know why they would, potentially block him off, because it's, or maybe Morel turns into a super utility. I really don't understand this move from the Cubs perspective. From a fantasy perspective, I think Ríos is just like a super late draft and hold type guy that, maybe could get, like you said, catch lightning in the bottle. But ultimately, this is just concerning. I wonder if there's an injury or something that we don't know about that is making some, or maybe Patrick Wisdom's done for them. Maybe they are going to like DFA Patrick Wisdom here in the near future. And then
this was a major league contract too.
Yeah,
so it wasn't like, so some of these signings you've seen, honestly, I think it's part of the WBC. It's like guys are leaving, they need warm bodies in camp. Let's try something out. Let's give somebody a chance, type of thing. But this was a major league deal, so he is, they're bringing him on the roster. So somebody, I don't think, and they made the corresponding move as they moved Ethan Roberts, and this is one of the things we talked about last week. Teams can now move guys to the 60-day IL. And Ethan Roberts is somebody recovering from Tommy John. So that was their corresponding move to get Ríos on the 40 was to move that guy to the 60. So that's where this sits. So coming into camp now, Ríos, he could go to the minors. He does have an option left according to roster resource. So if he has a bad camp, they can send him down. So he's not a lock to make the major league roster, but they did sign him to a major league deal.
Yeah. It's a bit surprising. I mean, I've liked Edwin Ríos as a potential sleeper in the past. So, I mean, I guess it's a guy you just kind of keep an eye on. He has a big camp. Maybe he makes his team. But right now, I think outside of draft and holds or maybe NL only, he doesn't really have any value that we're super concerned with. Let's move into our main topic and talk about how we approach talent for bad teams. I want to start with why don't we start with starters, right? This is something I tend to avoid just because bad teams don't win games, which means bad teams starting pitchers on bad teams don't win a ton of games. How do you approach kind of drafting a starting pitcher on bad teams?
Yeah, I'm very much with you. That's, it won't, there's that same thought that you just said. It's like, I love Hunter Greene and Nick Lodolo, and we'll get to them with the Reds. I love them as pitchers. I don't love them as pitchers on the Reds. And so when I look at this type of thing, there are certain times where I love the pitcher. I just hate where the pitcher's at. And we'll get into this in a little bit with saves too, because with saves have to happen. Wins can happen anywhere, but it's really tough for a pitcher on a bad team to go out and put a double-digit win. It's like when I'm looking at projections for like most of these guys, if not all these guys, to me, it's like 9. That's what I'm looking at for these guys. I have a tough time projecting double-digit wins for somebody, especially because a lot of these guys are young. But I would say 9, and I don't want to get greedy. I don't want to say, oh, this guy could be an 11, a 12, 9. It's a single digit when I'm trying to look at something, and this is always one of these tiebreakers for me. Can I get a guy that I look at as a lower quality pitcher, but can get me wins? I know it's tough to try to chase wins in that capacity, but if I can get a back end starter on a good team versus a middle starter on a bad team, it depends on where I need what my needs are at the time. And again, we're mostly talking about pitchers at the back end of the draft here. There's very few guys that we're going to discuss today that are front end guys. There's a handful of them, but none of them are on the Pittsburgh team. By ADP, because we're starting with Pittsburgh here, by ADP, Rosie Contreras is the only guy being drafted in a 12-team mixed league in the regular phase. 23 times 12 is 360. He is the only guy inside the top 360 that's being drafted now. And there's only, and if you add reserves, Mitch Keller definitely a reserve, and Luis Ortiz kind of sneaks in there. That's it. 3 pitchers from an entire team are draftable in a 12-team mixed league with reserves.
So on this Pittsburgh Pirates team, like, are you targeting any of these guys? Because I mean, for me, I had some real interest in Luis Ortiz in like a draft and hold situation, or maybe as a last starter in a 15-team mixed league. But I'm super worried that the Pirates showed their hand with their young starters last year with Rosie Contreras, doing this kind of up and down thing, trying to save innings, but also trying to save service time. I don't see why that would be any difference for a guy like Oviedo or a guy like Luis Ortiz. And the rest of the rotation for me is kind of meh. I don't really care outside of depth and a draft and hold.
Yeah, I have Mitch Keller on 2 teams because I'm a sucker. I've drafted 2 draft champions teams. I have Mitch Keller in both leagues. I will tell you, I can't even tell. I know I took him late, but I have, and he was definitely post round 25. But I have him in both draft champions leagues that I've done so far. But he is the only Pittsburgh pitcher that I have on either one of my drafted teams to date.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm finally the Charlie Brown that isn't gonna kick the football on Mitch Keller. I've fallen on my ass so many times on Mitch Keller, which means this will be the year that he breaks out, right? Like this will be finally the year he puts it all together and figures it out. But I can't buy in on it anymore. He's so hittable. And while like I feel like every spring we see him like dialing it up to like 99. In bullpens or whatever. And then by the time we actually get to the season, he's just the same old Mitch Keller that he always has been. Like I said, Rosie, I think, is an interesting guy because I think they'll actually let the reins off of him this year. But man, he's a whip killer. And until he kind of figures that out, and something we're going to talk about here in a second with Hunter Greene and Nick Lodolo is, when you're drafting a pitcher on a bad team, you're already sacrificing one of the 4 categories and wins. I don't want to sacrifice another one. Now, I think a guy like Rosie going just inside the top 300, is a lot more palatable than other guys going inside the top 200. But still, I tend to stay away from these guys that at best are likely going to deliver me 2 categories.
Yeah, and that's a majority of what we're talking about here. A lot of it, sometimes you got to hope for the volume, but a majority of guys that we're talking about on this list, we put all the starters, and I don't know if you're going to put it in the show notes tab, but like if I sort by ADP on all the teams that we're about to discuss by ADP, we're talking draftable in the active phase of a 12-team mixed league. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 pitchers have an ADP below 360 on all the rosters. And we don't even talk about Colorado because let's be real. None of us are drafting Colorado pitchers. We're just not. So we don't even talk about that team. So take those 5 starters just off the table because it's, you're looking at reserve picks and trying to find the right moment to pitch them. But we're talking about 8 pitchers that have an ADP that qualifies for the active phase of a 12-team mixed league. And this is out of Miami, Cincinnati, the Royals, Pittsburgh, Detroit, and Oakland. So that's six teams minus the Rockies. So 7, I'm trying to do the math, 7 of 30 teams that you got to look at this. There are guys that you're going to have to draft. And I know some of you single league formats are like, I'm going to have to draft a lot more than 7. Yeah, I'm right there with you. As somebody who's got to do 2 AL leagues this year, I'm looking at some of these names going, man, that's a steal at 456. It's going to happen.
Well, let's move over to the Reds and talk about them because they have those 2 young starters in Nick Lodolo and Hunter Greene, which people are getting really, really excited for. Paul and I talked about them, I think, on Friday's episode as going through the kind of starting pitching preview section. And kind of said, I'm not going to be able to get them in a lot of drafts this year just because I'm afraid of them having bad whips, them having home run issues in their home park, because Cincinnati is such a great place to hit. And then I'm also worried that the Reds just won't be good and they won't win games. Are you drafting these two guys at cost?
So I took Hunter Greene. I did take Hunter Greene in one league with that. I wanted to look to see where I ended up taking him with that. But when I was just looking at the draft board, the aggregate draft projections, and this is where I was talking. This isn't too greedy, but ATC are the only projections right now projecting a single-digit win total for Hunter Greene with that. So that's where, but everybody else is 10. So that's not terribly greedy. I would say Hunter Greene in the Arizona first pitch Arizona draft league, Hunter Greene went towards the back of the 8th round. And I had taken 2 starters and a closer before then and passed on him. So that's where Hunter Greene went in that particular one with that. And I let him pass for me. I didn't want to take him there. I was out, didn't want him. And then in the other one where I did get him, this is the one I ended up taking Hunter Greene in the 8th round. So that's where I did take him. But in that case, the draft zagged a little different in this one, but I ended up taking him as my 3rd starter behind Joe Musgrove and Blake Snell. I took Hunter Greene again, knowing that I was going to go on a bit of an offensive run, which I did. And my next starting pitcher wasn't until Drew Rasmussen in the 13th round. So in one draft, I passed on Hunter Greene at that point. The second one, I ended up taking him. And so in both cases, he's been an 8th round pitching talent for that case. And so I say I went both directions on it, but it comes down to league context. As I always try to say, I'm never out on anybody. It all depends on context. Like I said, in the other league there, the Arizona first pitch Arizona league, I'm not a fan of Carlos Rodon this year. I know that you and Paul discussed him a little bit on one of the recent episodes, but I ended up taking him in the 4th round only because when I looked at see where pitching was going, I was like, he was the best pitcher that I liked on the board at the time. I had debated between taking Carlos Rodon and Luis Castillo at that moment, and I ended up leaning Rodon to that point. And that was, but again, I think at that point, Alcantara, Cole, Strider, Nola, Woodruff, Scherzer, McClanahan, Verlander, Wheeler, Bieber had all gone. Those guys were all off the table already. And I was picking in the middle in that 8th spot again, coming back, knowing what was going to come back. I decided I wanted to go with what I hope to be volume and strikeouts.
Yeah, I mean, I think especially as we start to see starting pitching prices bump up here in March, as they always do because of injuries, because of people just wanting to prioritize, the better starting pitchers. I just worry you're going to start seeing him inside the top 80 picks, and to me, I can't take a guy who's potentially a 2-category starting pitcher as my SP2 or even SP3. And so for me, I'm out on probably both Lodolo and Hunter Greene. Anybody else on the Reds you care about from a starting pitching perspective?
Not in a mixed league. If I'm looking at an NL only format, Graham Ashcraft, I'm intrigued with him very, very late in a reserve. I know he's working on his repertoire. I will tell you this, in an 18-team mixed league, 40-man roster league, I have Brandon Williamson as my only minor league pitcher, because I remember reading a scouting report last year about him that comped him to a young Blake Snell. And I was like, ooh, boy. So it's like in an 18-team, there's only so many guys. He's the only pitcher I have on my minor league, and I'm keeping him. We actually start our minor league draft tomorrow in that one, and I'm keeping Williamson in there just because I want to give him one more chance with that. But that's it. And he's 744, so in a late draft champions, but he's going late because he's got a lot of flaws. He walks about 7.4 per 9 innings right now. But that's the only other guy I'm interested in. Luis Cessa is going late, and Luke Weaver's still there, but there's a reason why both those guys are going late. And I'm out on them. But Graham Ashcraft probably wears an ascot when he went off the field. I think I've made that joke before with him, but he's the only other guy that interests me in the NL only format.
What about the Oakland A's? Because I don't know if there's anybody that interests me in this rotation.
Holy cow, that's so bad. And that was one of the things that got my attention. their highest ranked pitcher by ADP is Ken Waldichuk at 370. So it was like, you're not drafting in a 12-team mixed league. If you end up with an ace starting pitcher on your roster, something's gone wrong. And the rest, James Kaprelian, a guy a lot of people liked last year, ADP 600. Shintaro Fujinami, a guy that walks everybody, 551. It's like, I don't want anybody on this Oakland roster, not anybody, unless this is something that, like, I'll have to come here and pick up somebody if I have multiple injuries. But there's not even a guy, because I've seen all these guys pitch. It's like, I don't want, like, maybe Kyle Muller, maybe in an AL. Like, I'll put him on my reserve roster and see what the matchup is. But man, if I end up with an Oakland guy on my roster, my draft didn't go the way I wanted it to go.
Yeah, I think the only place you're really looking at these guys is in a drafting hole. And I mean, they have some interesting guys. Waldichuk is a little bit interesting. But the two guys that I would probably be most likely to draft, on like a draft champions or an AL only, are the two guys most likely not to make this opening rotation. And that's Kyle Muller, who they traded for in the offseason, and JP Sears, who I think both are likely heading down to AAA to start the season. And so for those reasons, like, I probably won't be drafting any.
Well, and let's be, this is the team that everybody's looking at that's going to be like a 110 loss team. That's what a lot of the talk is. So like, if they're 52 and 110, like, we can't even put 9 wins down for any of these guys. Like, think more like 7. And then which one of these guys, like Paul Blackburn kind of had a run there for a little bit last year and was able to help you out in some areas out of nowhere type of thing. But who's going to really be able to provide any ratios help? Who's really going to be able to provide strikeouts? And that's why they have the ADPs that they do, because there's so little upside on this roster right now. So in the starting rotation, it's just, they're limited by the surrounding cast, and it's not good.
This may be one of the worst teams in MLB history. We'll talk about a couple other offensive guys that are somewhat interesting.
Yes.
But like, really, if you leave a draft with more than one Oakland A, you've done something wrong. So what about the Nationals? They've got a really interesting rotation of some guys who are, former top prospects, and then some older vets who've got injury woes or just have struggled. Are there guys on this team that you're targeting? Because there are a number of guys I actually really like.
Yeah, because Patrick Corbin's on that roster.
Patrick Corbin, baby.
I know that. No, Josiah Gray is the only pitcher on this roster the only starting pitcher that I would want on my team. And I'm not going to say it. There's nothing else. I can't really look at anybody else and be like, that's the guy I want. I do like Josiah Gray. I know he's had some problems with the home run rate, but I do not want to give up on him based off stuff that I've seen, based off stuff that I've heard him, like his interviews. I love what he could become. I just hate where he is. I wish he was somewhere else working with a team that could make the most of his abilities. This is a really tough situation for a young pitcher to be in right now. But I still want him, especially in a keeper league format. In the year to year, not so much, but in a keeper league format where he could potentially be relocated in the near future, he's somebody that I'm interested in.
Yeah, I like Gray for what he is. He's a guy who can get you strikeouts, and if he were to figure something out in terms of, kind of helping his command limit those home runs, even if it's, it's an astronomically high home run rate, and like even maybe just some positive regression or bringing it down to like a normal high home run rate would do wonders for a guy like Josiah Gray. I am very interested in Mackenzie Gore and Cade Cavalli. Only because of their prospect pedigree and the flashes what we have seen from them. However, they both have severe injury risk. And so the places where I'm interested in are not the same kind of places that we typically talk about guys like this that we would be interested. Usually we're talking about drafting holes, like super, super deep leagues. And for me, it's more like, hey, last guy in your fab league. Because I want the ability to drop these guys. I don't want them soaking up one of my 50-round draft and hold spots. And so if you're in a 15-team fab league or even a 12-team fab league, I don't mind taking a gamble on one of these guys as one of my last picks, just because I think the upside, especially on Gore, could be massive, but we just have no idea what the health are going to look like. So these are two guys I'm definitely watching in spring to see what they're doing. I'm not touching Steven Strasburg with a 50-foot pole. Especially
that
not
50 foot's not even long enough, dude. He's already seeing doctors. And it's bad. It's thoracic outlet. He's recovering from thoracic outlet. There's already reports this week about the nerve recovery is not going well. No, go ahead. Somebody, I want to say he was drafted in one of my leagues. And I was like, wow, really? Then again, somebody took Aristides Aquino in a draft champion this month, and he's in Japan. Yeah, he's playing in Japan, and he's been drafted. So if
you run out of names,
Strasburg can be drafted then too. But no,
yeah, and Patrick Corbin, like, I still take him late in a draft champions just because you need guys who can start, and he's still around super late,
and he can still get strikeouts. It comes with a severe penalty and risk, but the way they're paying him, they got to pitch him.
Yeah. Oh, he's for sure going to be the opening day starter and pitching every fifth day as long as he's healthy.
He could go for that Anthony Young loss record. That could be in play this year.
Trevor Williams is kind of interesting in a deeper format.
Yeah, a swing arm to see what could happen. Yeah, deeper NL only format. But the only guy that I'm like, ooh, I don't mind if I walk out of a draft with him before the reserve round would be Josiah Gray. I don't dollar end game. I'll take it. Reserve, I'll take it. But everybody else, I'm passing.
Let's talk about the Royals, because every time I discuss the Royals on a podcast, they seem to do something to make them less and less enticing, right? They just bring in an old veteran to soak up innings. And at this point, like, I don't even know what to make of a rotation that is made up of guys like Zack Greinke, Jordan Lyles, Ryan Yarbrough, Brad Keller, and the one guy I really do like, Brady Singer. Where are you at on these Royals?
The last guy is the only guy worth talking about. It's like it's the king in his court. For those of you old timers, remember Eddie Feigner and everybody else in softball, it is the king and the rest of the guys. None of them. Honestly, I would not draft any other Kansas City starting pitcher but Brady Singer, and I love Brady Singer. And this is a guy who's had a success tumbling the sinker and slider. He doesn't really have a third pitch yet, and part of that I put on the Royals. I mean, Cal Eldred was notoriously a terrible pitching coach. A lot of people, Ito's made a lot of fun of it. Jeff Zimmerman's made a lot of fun of it. He's gone, and they brought in Brian Sweeney, and they have Matt Quattaro and Paul Hoover, both former catchers they brought out of the Rays organization staff, brought them over here. So now they've got guys that are used to working with pitchers, and they have a new mind in here. And if that trio could sit down with Brady Singer and find something, like, hey, do this. And we've already seen what Singer can do with his current limitations, but if he gets another pitch, he could take a nice step forward. And so for me, Singer's the only guy that's even worth talking about. And I've already said how much I do like him this year and how much I enjoyed watching him pitch last year. If you want to go do your homework, go watch the 2 starts against Tampa Bay and New York right after the All-Star break. Struck out 10 and 12 in those 2 games. And just stuff zigging and zagging all over the place. It was really fun to watch the pitcher. It wasn't so fun as a Rays fan to watch him shut down the team, but it was fun to watch a guy pitch like that. And so go back and watch those 2 games. But none of these other guys, like last year, I spent $2 on Zack Greinke and AL Tout, and I didn't even make $2. It's like, I don't want to make that mistake. I'm glad Ryan Yarbrough is off my favorite team. I don't want to draft Ryan Yarbrough, especially with a team that's probably going to use him as a straight starter and not use him as an opener. So no, I'm out on all of these other guys. Even in an AL only format, Brad Keller's talking about adding a curveball to get some more. I saw something in Jeff's Mining the News. Like he's always tried to add something, and nothing's really ever stuck. So no, it's Brady Singer, and everybody else is off my draft list.
Yeah, and I mean, I love Brady Singer. I'm higher on him, and I've even tamped down my original projection for him a little bit because he was projecting out as almost a top 30 starter for me. I know that he is a 2-pitch guy, but he's still young enough to continue to develop that third pitch or add a new third pitch. And I love the park. And I just think he has the ability to take kind of another step forward, or at least hold on to the gains that we saw last year with a guy who already has been able to throw 180 innings. Those innings add up. Like if he's going to be close to 200 innings this year, that's going to mean a lot for a guy like Brady Singer.
It is a great if you're already reading the process from Tanner Bell and Jeff Zimmerman, or you haven't yet, there's a really good table in there. It talks about year-over-year workload increase for a guy. So if they've pitched this much, this is how many innings on the aggregate that they've gone up. So it's not by percentage, but total. And there's a really good table in the first third of that. So if you haven't bought that, and I think the ebook version of the book's like $15, but you should buy it. I spend a little bit of time every day reading through it over coffee in the morning with that. But like with Brady Singer in both the drafts, I keep mentioning the two draft champions that I've done so far. He has gone on the turn, the last pick of the 12th round, the first pick of the 13th round. And these were drafts that happened last month. So if we look to see where that may have moved up in other drafts, but that's where he's going right now. But again, this is me putting, some of those off the field factors into play. I want to see what a new staff can do with him, because from everything that's been reported, the previous regime in Kansas City did not do a great job. So Singer's success was almost in spite of that, not because of it.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. And I agree with you in terms of the other guys. I was literally just ordering my paperback copy of the process. I kept forgetting to do that. And when you brought it up, I was like, oh, I'm going to do that right now so I don't forget again. So it'll be here on Tuesday.
I read ebooks. So
I'm
on my phone or my Chromebook, whatever device, I've got it with me.
I like the feeling of a book in my hand, and so I need that. Plus, I like the highlight and stuff. I'm old school in that regards, I guess. Yeah, there's nobody else on the team. The one guy that I really had some interest in and drafted in a number of early DCs was Daniel Lynch, but he's now blocked and likely heading down to AAA to start the season. So, moving on to the next team, let's talk about the Tigers. This is a team with some really interesting guys and some guys that I've targeted in some drafts, including I want to start with Eduardo Rodriguez. Eduardo Rodriguez had just a disaster of a season last year, right? Signed the big deal, came in, was looking really good until the start pretty much that he got hurt in, and then went on to the IL, and then didn't come back for a while because of some sort of off-field issue that he had to step away from baseball, and he just wasn't the same pitcher when he came back. I feel like a guy going at pick 350 right now in FPC Draft Champions is an absolute steal for a guy that a lot of people were sitting a number 2 or 3 starter coming into last year.
Yeah, I was just looking at the two drafts. He went the 23rd and 26th round. These are types of players that I particularly enjoy targeting the year after a dumpster fire season, because like you said, people were targeting him as an SP3 last year. I know I was there with that. I want to say his ADP last year was in the low 120. I want to say 120, something along that line, somewhere there, but it was solid. And so now he's going in the end game of 15-team league in the reserves in one of them. So it's like, that's a guy, honestly, I could make a case for all. We have 6 Detroit pitchers listed here: Rodriguez, Manning, Turnbull, Lorenzen, Boyd, and Skubal. I could make a case for, I don't want to dismiss any of those guys. I could make a case depending on league format. Obviously, Rodriguez to me is the best target. I've long made a case where Michael Lorenzen wants to be a starting pitcher. Michael Lorenzen's body has not allowed him to be that starting pitcher, but Michael Lorenzen has the stuff to be a starting pitcher too. And this is one of these, okay, now he's in a really good opportunity to do that. He had it with the Angels last year and didn't make the most of it because his body failed him again. Matt Boyd, honestly, Matt Boyd's the one I'm most intrigued in here because the market price is nothing. I mean, at 480 ADP is nothing. I talked about this on the PitchCon weekend. I talked about like Matt Boyd rebound prior to him going down with we haven't seen him pitch with a non-bouncy baseball really yet. Remember, he had all the home run problems. Then he was pitching well in 2020, got hurt, and then came back at the very end, had the Tommy John surgery, came back and worked well out of relief for Seattle. But we haven't seen him pitch in a full season with a normal baseball. And now he's going to have that opportunity. So maybe some of that home run stuff could come down because it's not the super bouncy baseball. And yeah, they adjusted Comerica Field a little bit, but Matthew Boyd at his current market price, I believe, is the guy to target here. Everybody else, I mean, nobody's overly priced, but I believe that Matthew Boyd and Michael Lorenzen are two guys that are being a bit underpriced here. And speak to what we opened with about guys, the uncertainty creating opportunity. And these are two guys that I believe, we look back at the end of the season and they're going to be profit turners.
I'm actually right there with you on Matt Manning, on Matthew Boyd. But I do want to give a shout out to Matt Manning, who was really, really good, especially down the stretch. I know he finished with an injury, but I think that is kind of depressing his price quite a bit. And he's already throwing bullpens. I got to watch one that he was throwing a little bit earlier today. Looks pretty good, looks healthy. And considering where he's going, which is right around pick 455, like I'm willing to take a gamble as on Matt Manning as one of my last picks in a fab league. Again, I think he's more of a fab league guy than a draft and hold guy, only because you can drop him if he gets hurt. Like he's
Turnbull's another interesting guy too. I mean, Turnbull, the news earlier this week is he was hitting 94 out of his bullpen in spring, which is great because he ended. Sorry, watch. He ended last season. Injured. But if he's hitting 94 of the bullpen here, before he went down, he looked good. And somebody generates a lot of ground balls. So, like I said, you can make the case for any one of these Detroit guys based on upside in league format. To me, they're all draftable, even in AL only format, obviously. But all of these guys, to me, are rosterable. Conversely, like in Kansas City, I only want one guy. There's nobody else. Even in AL tout or AL labor, I'm not looking at anybody on that Kansas City starting staff but one guy.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. All right, let's move on to Miami, which probably has the most loaded of these rotations, and it's a really, really good rotation with a lot of arms. Let's start with Sandy Alcantara, who is a second round pick in a 15-team league right now, going as an SP1. Are you drafting Sandy Alcantara this year?
I haven't. No, and only because, and it's not because of where he pitches. I mean, it's just that I'm not somebody who invests early starting pitching. I have not been so far. But no, he hasn't been there for me. So even in picking, like I said, picking where I've picked 8th in both of these DCs, and I have passed. I believe I passed on him in both moments with that. But no, it's just I don't want to. I did pass on him. I took Goldschmidt and Alcantara with the very next pick in one of them. So he was there in that one. And the other one, I took Mike Trout instead of Alcantara with that. So it's like Alcantara's been that second round pick in both formats. He went 24 and 28 in the two that I was in. His ADP is 30. And so even back last month, he's already jumping in some of that. His value was already high in those particular leagues. With that, but this isn't somebody I would draft Alcantara if he pitched in anywhere else, like in Oakland. Then I'd be like, no, I'm not going to take him. But I'm fine with him in Miami. That's not a problem. I would say with just about this entire staff, I'm cool with taking anybody on this staff except the back end. I mean, Johnny Cueto was fun to watch last year, but no, it does not miss enough at bats. And the news that Sixto Sanchez, he's lost 40 pounds. I mean, didn't even recognize him in the picture from spring, but he's also lost about 10 miles an hour off his fastball because the last workout had him an 88. Like, no, thanks. No, thanks. It was fun when he was hitting 100, but his last workout, he wasn't even hitting 90 yet. So slow your roll on, he's in his best shape of his life because his fastball is in no shape with that. But everybody else here could make a case for it. You can make a case for Puck's upside. Maybe the Miami could make do with him what they did with Luzardo. They made a nice adjustment to Luzardo, and Luzardo certainly pitched better as a Marlin than he did as an A. And Cabrera has the upside. Rogers, we've seen it before. He can do it again. But I do love the options that we have here in Miami. They're going to be a 500 club at best. Even if everything breaks right, they're still going to be like a 500 club. But I do love the options here because there's more upside than downside overall.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I'm starting to get a little concerned, and it may actually lower my projection on Sandy Alcantara a bit, just because I don't know how much I trust that defense behind him with Jazz.
Joey Wendell as shortstop is not going to be a good thing.
And Jazz moving out to center, like I think that infield defense could be potentially pretty bad. And then you add in the shift rules. This could be something that affects him a little bit more. And now you wonder, like, okay, what makes Alcantara so valuable is his ability to volume, which I don't question.
Which is a rare skill these days.
Yeah. But it's his ability to volume with such pristine ratios. Yeah. And I worry that he gets unlucky to the point where that is no longer a huge benefit in the way it has been the last few years. So I think I may end up having to drop him a little bit, which is a bummer for me because I do like taking a guy like him to kind of stabilize my team. But I think I'm going to be below ADP at that point. I really like Trevor Rogers. I really like Edward Cabrera. Some interesting gambles, around, I think they're going around pick 220 for Edward Cabrera, 254 for Trevor Rogers. I think they're both really, really nice and just gamble. Rogers, especially if the changeup looks good in spring, I'm going to be all over him. And he was a 5th, 6th round pick last year. You're now getting him extremely late. And Edward Cabrera has shown amazing flashes. And I feel like the upside is pretty amazing for a guy going at pick 220. So these are two guys I'm definitely targeting. Puck, I don't know what to do with him. I love the talent, but I don't know if he's even going to be a starter now that he's not in Oakland. So, and I don't know that he's going to be a closer either. I think he's going to be a multi-inning kind of reliever. And I don't know how much that makes sense on a team that's not going to be necessarily winning a ton of games. So they're not going to be as bad as these other teams.
Yep. Yeah, it could go in a number of directions, but that's the thing with Miami. They always seem to have somebody that makes a step up. It's like, I know in 2021, Trevor Rogers, when he had that, I remember being so angry in an NL. I think I was sub drafting for somebody, and I had Trevor Rogers of $1 at the end of the auction, going once, going twice. Somebody said 2, and I didn't have a $2. I was sub drafting for somebody else. I was like, oh my god, you got him. I thought I had him. It's like, here it is, and somebody jumped and took him for $2, and I couldn't say anything with that, and that was tough. But they always seem to, they have a better track record. But I made the crack about Joey Wendell as the shortstop. I don't know how that's going to work out. They may have to go, like, I don't know why they don't go pay Elvis Andrus, because at this point, Elvis Andrus probably be like, ooh, contract? Thank you. I take it. And give me the money, like kind of like Robbie Grossman did or something. But Joey Wendell is not an everyday shortstop. The age, the arm, the foot, none of that is there. He's best used in versatility, and he is not an everyday shortstop. And that is a legitimate concern you raised.
Yeah, absolutely. What we're gonna do now is we're gonna go to closers, and I think then we may actually cut it for the day since we're already almost an hour. And then maybe we will tackle the hitters another time. Maybe try to
talk a lot.
Yeah, maybe we'll try to sneak in an extra recording somewhere. Your general philosophy in terms of drafting closers on bad teams is what?
All right, so there's some data points that I'd like to cover. Like one, but this was like a different era. But like the thing that comes to mind is Brian Harvey once saved 47 games for a 62-win Florida Marlin team. But those days are in the past. That said, bad teams tend to give the ball to the same guy forever. It's like I went back and looked at. I pulled a chart, and maybe I don't know if it's easy to put in the show notes, but I'm looking at a chart. I pulled a chart that said, I want to know the team save totals, because there's not a way to do this at a stat head. I even asked the head of stat head, is there a way to pull this? You can't. But I wanted like the highest save totals based on team winning percentage. There's not a single report. But I said, okay, show me the team save totals by team winning percentage. And the R squared for that was 0.41. So moderate. With that, but it's like the record for most saves by a team with a sub 500 winning record is 60 saves for a team with a sub 500 winning record. That said, that team was 80 and 82, and that team was the 2015 Tampa Bay Rays, who had Brad Boxberger save 41 games. So it's like these things. So a 40-game season from a sub 500 team, but it took that. But then even then, the 2017 Rays had 53 saves, and Alex Colomé was 47 of those 53. It's like, that's the sweet spot. That's what you want to get into. The other one, the Miami Marlins had 55 saves in 2016 as a 79-win team. So like, if you want to try to find a volume guy that's going to get you saves, it's going to have to be like a near 500 club, because the highest save total for somebody nowhere near, like the 2002 Pirates, had 47 saves and were a 72 and 89 win team. So it's like if you're trying to find a volume save, you're trying to find that Colomé, that Boxberger, that Craig Kimbrell, that one year he had 40-something saves for a bad Atlanta team, or that year the Miami team I was just talking about, AJ Ramos had 40 saves for that club. You want somebody that's near 500 with that. So that was one of the data points I looked at. And then the other data point is relievers with 25 plus saves. And I tweeted this out this morning because times are changing. Even in 2015, we had 24 pitchers with at least 25 saves. Last year, we had 11 pitchers with that many saves. And their ADP, when I looked at their ADP and said, okay, show me the ADP of the guys that had 25 plus saves last year. Josh Hader, Liam Hendricks, Emmanuel Clase, Edwin Diaz, Ryan Presley, Kenley Jansen, Jordan Romano were all drafted inside of the top 75, and they all returned that investment. You were drafting saves because everybody else was like pushing guys up, and they returned that investment. Taylor Rogers, Camilo Doval, and Gregory Soto were all drafted between 129 and 159. So that was like Gregory Soto was the guy everybody was trying to avoid, yet he ended up with 25 plus saves, and then was Daniel Bard at 313. So like you're trying to find this year's version of Daniel Bard. Well, he is this year's version of Daniel Bard because he's on the Rockies. The Rockies gave him an extension, so Daniel Bard's out there, and he's no longer going at pick 313. So that's the kind of thing you're trying to look for. But if you look at the current ADP of these teams that we're looking for, we took Bard off this because Bard's the closer, and there's no doubt about that in the Rockies. But you look at the rest of the ADP, and you got David Bednar at 103, Alexis Diaz at 138. Neither of those are bargains. We put Daniel Bard in here at 131. Kyle Finnegan, 228, Scott Barlow, 142, and Alex Lang, 226. And like Alex Lang could be this year's Greg Soto, but somebody else could step up too, because Alex Lang certainly has, he's not without flaws, but none of these guys are. But again, you can get saves on bad teams, but you don't want your guys on really bad teams. That's the thing. So it's like whoever's going to be the closer in Oakland, it could be Danny Jimenez. We didn't even list that because it's going to be messy. Even if they came out and said Trevor May is going to be my everyday closer, it's going to be tough for Trevor May to get to 25 saves this year for a team that we said may win 52.
And also may trade a guy like Trevor May midseason.
It was on a 1-year deal, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, I'm not going to get, as an AL only guy, I guess I have to get excited about the closer there at some point because, there's only so many to take with that. But that's where this gets noisy. When you only have 11 guys getting 25 plus saves, beggars can't be choosers. You got to go out and find your saves somewhere. This is why Greg Jewett's closer report so money, because he covers all these dudes. And it gives us something to try to look at. But this is why some teams pay for saves. And you can get saves off of bad teams, but the correlation shows you the better the winning percentage, the more likely to get saves. But you can get volume there. So it's like of those guys, though, of Bednar, Diaz, Bard, Finnegan, Barlow, and Lang, Diaz is the one that I would target, and he's the one that I've taken in leagues. I took Alexis Diaz in the middle of the 11th round in one of my drafts as my second closer behind Emmanuel Clase, because most of the closers had gone by that point. He was still like the line of last defense. In fact, Scott Barlow had gone a few picks before him, and so that the next guy, that's where I went. And right after me, somebody took Clay Holmes. And 2 picks after that, somebody took Andres Munoz. And 3 picks after that, somebody took Yohan Duran. So that's where that kind of splits. But when I look at Diaz, seems to be like the guy that could be the closer who gets almost all the saves on a really bad team. Now, I don't see the Reds being a near 500 team. I see them being down in that 70 to 72 range. And if I mentioned earlier that the highest amount of saves that we've seen from a team with no more than 72 wins is 47, then what are the odds of Diaz hitting that? Slim to none. But if he can get me over the 25% barrier, that means he's in the top third of save totals based off what happened last year. So people got to adjust their 40 saves are just so tough to do these days. But even on a bad team, you can still, I'm looking at, 1, 2, 3 teams that all had 47 saves with 76 or fewer wins. And that was the 2019 Padres, 2002 Pirates, 2004 Reds. So these things can happen. It's just rare.
Yeah, I think for me, I really want to make sure if I'm drafting one of these guys that they are the guy, right? Like I don't want the Oakland situation or the Miami situation
Yeah.
where there might be 3 or 4 guys involved or we just have no idea. Even in Kansas City with Scott Barlow, them bringing in Aroldis Chapman scares me a little bit. And so I've been kind of pushing him down my board a little bit as well. Like I don't have a problem drafting Bednar. I don't have a problem drafting Alexis Diaz, especially if I'm waiting a little bit more on saves. But you're right, like the ceiling potential on some of these closers is much more capped than on a player on good teams. Alex Lang's a really interesting guy because he's going fairly late for a guy who potentially could be a closer. But like you said, we don't know for sure that he is the closer or that they're going to go with a set guy. So it makes him much more of like a closer 3 if you're drafting him.
Oh yeah, much more Soto. I thought we would see more of a bump with that when the Soto deal went down, but we really haven't seen that much of a bump yet. But they do have multiple options in that particular pen. We'll see. We'll see where it ends up, but they do have options in that capacity. Jason Foley has certainly pitched well enough to get a shot. Even Will Vest, so they do have abilities. But again, Diaz to me is the most attractive bad team closer of this bunch because of the strikeouts that he can bring to the table, and they're to me they have the potential if the bats play out right to be a better hitting club than the Rockies. So it's like Daniel Bard's out there, but I think we've seen the best of Daniel Bard, whereas Alexis Diaz we could see another level. And the other piece of that, like you said, you try to avoid guys like a Trevor May who's on a 1-year deal. That's the other thing I wanted to bring up is look for guys that are on multi-year deals. Like Diaz is nowhere close to that. Scott Barlow was a free agent after next season. So really, like, this is the time to trade him. If Kansas City wants to get value, this is the time to trade him. So you mentioned Aroldis Chapman being giving you a little bit of pause with Barlow. I'm more concerned about this is the time to trade Barlow. If you're going to trade a closer, you trade him before his final year. You can get more value with him if you do that. So, and Kansas City's not going anywhere this year, so why wouldn't they try to trade him? So that's where I have my concerns with him. And with we've talked about Hunter Harvey versus Kyle Finnegan, but Kyle Finnegan's also, I want to say Finnegan's on a similar type of deal. When I looked at Finnegan's situation, again, Nationals are going nowhere, and so that's where. Well, he's a free agent, so he's got 2.5 years. So they don't need to, but he's also turning 32 this year. So if they can get any value of him, maybe they do move him and go there.
And he's entering arbitration for the first time, I think, next year. So plus they also added Alex Colomé, a guy with quote unquote proven closing experience, which makes things a little bit more complicated there. Though Finnegan looks like he's probably the lead guy. Harvey or Alex Colomé could kind of complicate things in the future for him. All right, Jason, that was a fun kind of different topic for today. So you and I will see each other for Potapalooza next week. That will be live, or that will be stream live, but also I will put that hour of the podcast on the feed. So that way, if people want to just listen to that via the feed, they can. What are you working on? Where can people reach you at?
So I am finishing the bold prediction series today and tomorrow. So the NL West bold prediction series, and that will wrap me up for the season. I wanted to pull up give you all, because I've done this every week, give you guys a heads up on who that's going to be. So the 10 names that I have for the NL West, hitter and pitcher, Arizona, Jake McCarthy and Scott Magoo. We talked about it last week. Colorado, Nolan Jones. And honestly, we talked about like how bad it is with the Rockies, right? You can't talk Daniel Bard. So I was like, let me find the best name out there. So Phineas Delbonto Smith is who I have as the pitcher. I have Gavin Lux and Gavin Stone because I was just so uncreative. I just went with Gavin's for the Dodgers. And then Ha-Sung Kim and Blake Snell for the Padres, and David Villar and Sean Manaea for your San Francisco Giants is who I plan to write up. And that will get my series done so I can then start, finalizing what I'm going to do at AL Labor this year. Because that's going to, you mentioned we have Potapalooza next week, but then the following weekend, I'm going to be at First Pitch, Florida. And so won't be able to record that one. And so I'll be only doing this podcast once in the next 3 weeks, but Potapalooza next weekend. and then I have to take off the weekend to be at labor.
Well, maybe we can try to figure out a time during the week where we can do kind of a labor wrap-up show for you to kind of talk about what you did, defend your good and poor decisions. We'll try to hook up maybe midweek and do a little recording for that.
Yeah, I've got some night flexibility if you do, given the time zone stuff. I am an old man, and I do go to bed earlier these days. I don't keep the midnight oil burning anymore, but
I'm sure we can figure
some flexibility.
You can reach me on Twitter at Justin Mason FWFB, writing daily at Fangraphs, and going to be writing really regularly at Fantasy Pros. And let's see, TGFBI podcast, Podapalooza coming up. Friends of Fantasy Benefits podcast is recording 3 to 4 times a week right now. And if you want to sign up for TGFBI Satellite League, you can still do that at tgfbi.com. But those are going to close fairly quickly. So if you have been thinking about trying to win your way into 2024 TGFBI and want to sign up for a satellite league, do that quickly, because like I said, there are limited spots, and once it's filled, and I think it'll probably stop filling sometime in early March. So for Jason and myself, thank you for listening. Have a fantastic baseball offseason.
Thanks all.